morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, we're going to be taking a look at the best ways to item lock your opponent. Item lock has always been a very, very, very powerful tool in the Pokemon trading card game. Stopping your opponent playing their item cards, you're talking stuff like Ultra Ball and other cards to search out their Pokemon. We're talking cards like Switch, which will help you get out of the active and get a new Pokemon in the active. And then we're talking trickier cards like Aqua Patch to accelerate energy, or Energy Switch to move energy, etc. And in the past, we've seen extremely powerful cards like Trevenant, like Seismitoad, like Dialga, that have all given us extremely good item lock. So what are we going to have post-rotation? So I thought, right, this seems like a fun time to go and drop a top 10 list, the top 10 best ways to item lock your opponent after the rotation. Now, when I say after the rotation, I mean we're not counting stuff like Noivern GX, because Noivern GX is rotated, and I will be including a couple of cards on this list that are not actually out yet, but by the time it's relevant, they will be, so I am totally okay with it, ladies and gentlemen. I am totally okay with it. So in at number 5, we've got a joint entry for Psyduck and Whismur. Now, they're not exactly the same card, but I think their usage is similar enough here that we can justify putting them both in together. Psyduck for 1 colorless energy does 10 damage. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent can't play any trainer cards from their hand during their next turn. Now, the thing about Psyduck here is this is actually trainer lock, not item lock, which means that you're actually blocking a whole bunch more. You're actually blocking supporter cards like Cynthia, and you're blocking stadium cards like Thunder Mountain Prism Star. You're blocking everything. Items, stadiums, supporters, any trainer cards are gone. Whismur here, a similar kind of thing. Shout out to Beware in the artwork. You can use this attack, 1 colorless energy, only if you go second and only on your first turn. Your opponent can't play any trainer cards from their hand during their next turn. So whereas Psyduck is flip a coin, you can do it as often as you like. Whismur, you don't flip a coin, it's an automatic trainer lock, and it is trainer lock again. But it is a one-shot deal for 1 turn. Both useful, both kind of fun, but both very limited in their scope here, so a joint entry at number 5 seems about right. In at number 4, a card that hasn't actually been released yet, but I think is going to be pretty gosh darn good when it comes to item locking. It's the Cryogonal, which is going to be coming out in Unified Minds, and there are a couple cards on this list that have not actually been released yet. I've made videos about them, links in the description. So Cryogonal here is a basic Pokemon, and for 1 water energy, 10 damage, your opponent cannot play any item cards from their hand during their next turn. This is just flat out item lock with no ifs, no buts, no maybes. Your opponent is item locked for as long as you choose to use Cryogonal. For as long as you're sitting there attacking, your opponent has no item cards, and they're basically just stuck. Now, as a side note, next format, we're losing most of our good Pokemon search, our Ultra Ball, our Nest Ball, and so on, which means people are going to have to use stuff like Professor Owl's Lecture and like Professor Oak's Setting, link in the description, to actually search out their Pokemon in the early game. But make no mistake about it, people are still going to be using stuff like Pokemon Communication, and Psychic decks are still going to be using stuff like Mysterious Treasure, and Grass decks are still going to be using stuff like Netball, and so on. So blocking items is still going to be extremely useful. But is it going to be that useful when you're only hitting for 10 damage? That's where I really start to become a little bit worried about Cryogonal. You got 90 HP, you're hitting 10 damage. Now, the good news is you're hitting a really good weakness on stuff like Reshiram and Charizard, and the bad news is that you're losing stuff like Choice Band, and you're losing stuff like Professor Kukui. All of our best damage modifiers, such that you are actually hitting 10 damage per turn. Now, you can use Shrine of Punishment, and that's lovely, but generally speaking, when you're item locking, what you really want to do is either completely stop your opponent playing the game or be knocking them out. So if we go back to Seismitoad then, one of the things Seismitoad did so well is it either had the combination of Hypnotoxic Laser and Verbank City Gym, so that they were poisoned and taking free damage counters between turns, or they would combine it with stuff like Crushing Hammer and Super Scoop Up, such that your opponent didn't take prizes and you were getting rid of their energy. The non-banned version would use stuff like Slurpuff, and then after a while, we started using Lysander's trump card, and then it got banned because it was legitimately broken. Like, it properly broke the game. I'm not seeing that with Cryogonal here, and I think that's the problem. You've only got 90 HP, you're only doing 10 damage, and as much as I love that this is just basic Pokemon single energy item lock, and that is 100% true, you're in an awkward position here where, yeah, you're not actually going to stay around for too long, and you're not going to be taking prizes. I'm not entirely convinced by Cryogonal. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. In at number 3, we've got Luxio. I like Luxio, although Luxio's been out for a little while and hasn't actually seen much success at all. Now, first thing to point out, we do have Shinx here, and Shinx has got that ability that we see on a few Pokemon. If you go second, this Pokemon can evolve during your first turn. That's nice. So we've got evolution help here. And then Luxio, for a single colourless energy, 30 damage, your opponent cannot play any item cards from their hand during their next turn. And that's good, and we're up to 30 damage now, and colourless energy, so that's lovely, but we've still only got 90 HP. Now, the good news is, stuff like Buzzwole GX will be gone post-rotation, but people are still going to be playing Pikachu and Zekrom, so fighting decks will still be out there. And I worry that 30 damage isn't enough. Now, you do have Electro Power to do a little bit of extra damage, and we do have Electro Charger to recover them, but that will still only take you so far. We're still losing Choice Band, and maybe a combination of Shrine of Punishment and Electro Power will put you up to enough damage here, but I remain slightly skeptical. Once again, we're in this awkward situation where we're not quite doing enough damage, and we don't quite have enough HP. Now, the good news is we got Luxray. And Luxray's got 150 HP, and when it's active it takes 30 less from attacks, plus it's got free retreat, which is lovely. But why am I talking about Luxray here? Because we've got Memory Energy. And Memory Energy is a colourless energy that lets you use the attacks of your pre-evolutions. Oh, yeah, that's pretty gosh darn good, ladies and gentlemen. So now Luxray for one colourless energy can do 30 damage plus item lock. And Luxray's got a lot more staying power than Luxio does. But we're losing Shining Celebi. And the thing is, Shining Celebi did the same thing as Memory Energy, so you could essentially use Memory Energy or Shining Celebi, or even have both of them as a bit of a redundancy. But I worry that losing Shining Celebi and the fact that it's not seen a huge amount of play up till now might mean that it's just not quite good enough. I mean, if you come across something like a Reshiram and Charizard, while you're sitting there doing 30 damage per turn, they're just going to outrage you into submission after playing a Welder, which is not an item card. I still think there's potential here. I think Luxio is the beginning of this list where I can go, yeah, I can expect these to see a bit of play and a bit of success. Coming in at number 2, we've got Omastar. And honestly, ladies and gentlemen, Omastar is about to get an awful lot more love. So Omastar here has got a nice ability If you've got fewer Pokemon in play than your opponent, they're item locked. Now, it is fewer, not equal to or fewer, and that means that if you've got the same number of Pokemon out, your opponent isn't item locked. But if you can catch your opponent unawares here, they're out. They're just completely and utterly gone, and there's nothing that they can do. I was playing Granbull the other day. I benched 5 Pokemon. My opponent dropped an unidentified fossil. I was completely unprepared for Omastar, and as soon as she evolved into Omastar, I scooped because I knew there was no way I could win that game. Though Granbull is really, really reliant on item cards to clear their hand and do enough damage. Now, you do evolve from unidentified fossil, which makes things a bit awkward, but we're getting a couple of cards in the near future that are really, really going to help. First of all, we're getting Laboratory, or Pokemon Research Lab. Once during each player's turn, they may search for 2 Pokemon that evolve from unidentified fossil, put them onto the bench, and shuffle their deck. Now, it will end your turn, but it basically gets you 2 Omanyte out ready to evolve up. But we've also got cards like Marshadow, and coming out soon, we've got Fiona. And what these cards have in common is that they've got abilities that can be used while sitting on the bench, and it involves getting them off the field. So if we have a look at Marshadow, it's the one that just came out in Unbroken Bonds. You, if it's on your bench, can discard any stadium in play and then discard it. Fiona, if it's on the bench, you can make your opponent switch their active and then put it on the bottom of your deck. And what this means essentially is that you can get yourself 1 or 2 Omastar out, and you can cheat it out using Laboratory. You can put only Fiona and Marshadow in your deck, because you cannot start with unidentified fossil, you cannot start with Omanyte. So if you just have those and then Fiona/Marshadow, you guarantee to be starting with one of those Pokemon, and you can then discard them all, and your opponent loses, because they've got no items for the game. Tell me that doesn't sound like fun. I think these new Pokemon like Marshadow and then Laboratory is going to make Omastar genuinely viable. I expect to see some Omastar decks. And there's nothing to stop you playing other Pokemon like Kabutops, who can support a lock, or Aerodactyl, who's just a generally good attacker, to beef up that deck generally. Which means that in at number 1, it's got to be Beheeyem. And the reason why Beheeyem gets in at number 1 here is because it does a decent amount of damage, and it's all on you. Omastar depends how many Pokemon your opponent's got out. Luxray is a stage 2, etc, etc. Here, stage 1, triple acceleration energy, go. The attack for free colorless energy does 90 damage, and then you shuffle Beheeyem and all cards attached to it into your deck. Which means that triple acceleration energy gets shuffled into your deck before it actually gets discarded, so you never lose your triple acceleration energy. This works like Excelgor, and Excelgor was good. Paralysis, poison, 50 damage, shuffle into the deck. That really revolved around double colorless energy, relied on it. And here, we've got a very similar thing going on, except we've got item lock. I imagine that this is going to work. I can see this being extremely successful, and it does 90 damage. And then you can throw up a wall Pokemon, maybe something like Shuckle, that your opponent cannot take down or that they're unprepared for. And the fact that you can throw up a wall Pokemon, the fact that you're doing 90 damage, the fact that it's for a single energy and is fairly reliable, that's why I think Beheeyem is going to be the best item lot we've seen so far. At least that we're going to have post-rotation. Because the fact of the matter is, Luxio's been legal for a while, nobody's playing it. And Omastar's been legal for a while, it's cropping up in rogue decks, but it's not seeing that much play. Although, to be fair, I think Laboratory is really going to make the difference in terms of making that viable. Beheeyem hasn't had a chance yet, and maybe it's just the fact that it hasn't had a chance to shine makes me overly enthusiastic. I don't know. But I do think there's an awful lot of potential here, ladies and gentlemen. I guess we'll find out rather shortly. For now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to know what you think. Tell me what your favourite item lock is going to be after rotation. Tell me if you think any of them are going to be viable. Go nuts! be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where we talk about a whole bunch of games that don't even have any Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.